When the country called for educated youth to go to the countryside, I stopped my love-struck brother from joining his girlfriend in that so-called shared hardship. Later, with the help of our parents, my brother built a successful career, while his girlfriend died far away from home. By the time I had built my own family and business through sheer effort, becoming a well-known entrepreneur, he deliberately ruined my company and caused the deaths of my husband and son. I knelt before him, begging for mercy, but he only smiled cruelly and shoved me into the mud brick house where his girlfriend had once lived, throwing me to a lecherous old bachelor. "If you hadn't stopped me back then," he hissed, "she wouldn't have died." After a night of torment, I used a shard of porcelain to cut open my wrist and bled to death. When I opened my eyes again, I saw my brother struggling desperately to rush past the station gate to board the train with his beloved girlfriend and leave for the countryside. This time, I released my grip on the iron gate and stepped aside. "My dear brother, may you finally get what you wished for." Zane broke free from our mother's grasp, roaring as he lunged toward the green train that had already started moving. "Maya, wait for me. I won't let you go alone this time." I stood on the platform, watching them cling to each other tightly at the door of the train. The whistle tore through the station's noise and through my parents' sanity. My father, who had been talking to the station staff, turned a dark, cutting glare on me. His voice was a blade. "Do you even know what you've done?" Mother, eyes red, slapped me hard across the face. "Jinx. I knew you were born to ruin us. If anything happens to your brother, I'll skin you alive." My cheek burned, but my heart was frozen. I looked at their furious faces, then at the train vanishing into the distance. I knew it then, my brother had been reborn too. I didn't bother wiping the blood from my mouth. I only whispered silently to myself, "May you get exactly what you deserve." The staff, unwilling to take responsibility, left the station gate for us to manage. And I had let my brother through. For that, my parents cursed me every single day. The first thing Zane did upon arriving at the youth camp was send me a letter. "Stop interfering in my life." I replied only, "As you wish." Then, let out a low sigh. I went to find Jensen, the man who would become my husband in my previous life. Last time, it took me years to meet him. This time, I wasn't going to wait that long. Zane got what he wanted. He went to the countryside with Maya. But the wind there was not romantic. It carried nothing but dust that plastered your face and choked your breath. Under our parents' watchful connections, news from them came often at first. Barely arriving at the camp, Zane and Maya used the moment when father's control was weakest to get married, becoming the model couple among the educated youth. Father's plan to form an alliance with the deputy director of the education bureau collapsed. He was so furious he threw his teacup at me, smashing it against my face. In my previous life, that marriage had protected Zane, allowing him to avoid many hardships. This time, without that alliance, would he still be so lucky? His letters kept coming, shifting from pride to complaints. The brick beds were too hard. The food too plain. No oil. No flavor. May Amy's so-called sister-in-law couldn't even hold a hoe properly. Her hands blistered and bled the first day. At first, Zane could still coax her gently. But soon, without almost sigh, their letters were filled only with Maya's sobs. "Zane, aren't your parents powerful? Why haven't they gotten us transferred back?" In the end, all that remained in their correspondence were grievances, and the faint stench of desperation to return home. Their once great love crumbled under the weight of reality. Father refused to yield, ignoring mother's tearful pleas. He slammed his cup against the table. Didn't he say he could handle himself? Let him learn what hardship means. Reborn. Zane knew the countryside campaign would soon end. All he had to do was wait a little longer, and he'd return to the city with honor. But Maya didn't know that. Nor did anyone else. Hopeless, Maya found herself another way out. By crawling into the bed of a local official's son, hoping her body could buy her a ticket home. The affair was caught before it even began. Zane went mad. He found the official's son and beat him senseless, nearly killing him. The matter couldn't be silenced. The scandal of adultery and intentional assault landed at all three of them in detention. When the news reached home, the Nora family exploded. Mother wailed and cursed father for not rescuing them sooner. Then she turned on me, slapping me hard across the face. But such pain meant nothing to me anymore, not after what I'd liked through before. Zane let out a low sigh. Is this the love you wanted? Are you satisfied now? For their sake, my parents ran themselves ragged, spent every gift they could muster, and hit wall after wall. Desperate, their eyes turned toward me. Mother took my hand, her tone soft for the first time in my life. Nora, only you can save your brother. Walter said. If you agree to marry his son. They'd said the same thing in my previous life. But back then, I met Jensen, the retired official's son. I tore my hand away. That thug? I'll never marry him. Mother's face instantly collapsed. Her false gentleness gone. Her shrill voice pierced the air. You're just a girl. Who you marry doesn't matter. Walter's family is willing to take you. What more do you want? Your brother is the pillar of this family. If he's ruined, we're all ruined. Father, who had been silently smoking, crushed his cigarette into the ashtray. When he finally looked up, his murky eyes were cold and hollow. Do as your mother says. 4 words, my final sentence. I looked at their self-righteous faces, my chest tightening until I could barely breathe. Without a word, I walked into the kitchen. Bang! When I came out, a shard of porcelain lay in my hand. The edge jagged and sharp. I pressed it against my throat, staring at their horrified faces, and said each word clearly. If you keep forcing me, I'll die right here. Let's see if Walter wants a dead daughter-in-law. They froze. And when I went on hunger strike, refusing to yield no matter how they screamed, the scandal spread through the neighborhood. Afraid of being accused of forcing a marriage, the Walters withdrew the proposal. With no other choice, my parents emptied their savings and their pride, begging and bribing anyone they could find. Until finally, they dragged Zane and Maya out of that filthy pit in the countryside. When they returned, they spent half a day washing themselves clean. Maya laughed sweetly, calling my parents mom and dad as if nothing had happened. But her actions had already brought our parents enough shame. If Zane hadn't insisted, it wasn't her fault. That bastard tried to force her. Thank God someone walked in. Their marriage would have ended right then and there. I asked him quietly, are you happy with this outcome? His eyes flared. What are you implying? I smiled faintly. Nothing at all. The irony of fate arrived with a speed and intensity that was almost deafening. Less than a month after their return to the city, the news was everywhere on the radio, in the newspapers. It was impossible to avoid. The national policy of sending all the educated youth back to the cities was officially announced. The result of my parents' sacrifice, which had drained them of everything they had, became a complete joke. Our family, once the envy of all for its high-ranking officials, had become the most despised and pitied household in the neighborhood. Did you hear? And Nora family has squandered everything, only to end up with nothing. Gossip cut like daggers, making it impossible for my parents to hold their heads high. Zane let out a low sigh. Too, was hit hard. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, his temper flaring more than ever. Poverty and mockery only served to brew resentment within our home. Maya, unable to bear the disparity between what she had imagined and a reality, blamed me for everything that had gone wrong. It's all Nora's fault. If she had agreed to marry back then, our family wouldn't have ended up like this. She screamed at me from across the room. And my mother, that paragon of bias, stood firmly on my sister-in-law's side, glaring at me with venomous hatred. Mia's right. If only you had sacrificed for the family, we wouldn't be in this mess. She spat, her voice dripping with contempt. Their voices intertwined, quickly turning their anger toward me. I had earned my position as a broadcaster at the city TV station through my own merit, my work respectable, my income stable. To them, I had become their last hope. Nora, you should give your job to your sister-in-law. My mother's voice was not pleading, but commanding. It would be a contribution to the family. Maya immediately chimed in, as if she had every right to. Exactly. And just a high school graduate. Broadcasting isn't that hard. I couldn't help but laugh at their shamelessness. This job is mine, earned through my own effort. If she wants it, she can work for it. Nora, how selfish can you be? My mother began to yell, her voice rising in fury. You want to watch this family fall apart, don't you? The shouting roused my father from the back room. Like an enraged lion, he stormed out, his eyes bloodshot. Enough. He glared at me with a gaze that was void of any fatherly affection. Only cold judgment. You're a Nora, and you should sacrifice for this family. Your brother is like this, and you still want to argue? I stood tall and met his gaze head on. I haven't done anything wrong. Why should I sacrifice my life to make up for his mistakes? That one sentence was enough to ignite the powder keg. Father George trembled with rage, pointing at the door. Fine. Fine. You've got your wings now. This family can't hold you anymore. Get out. Get out of my house. My mother immediately collapsed onto the floor, banging her fists against her thighs, crying out in agony. Her voice echoed through the entire hallway. What did I do to deserve this? I gave birth to such an ungrateful child. I raised you, and this is how you repay me? My life is such a misery. I stared at my father, my gaze unwavering. Pack your things and leave. I dragged a shabby suitcase down the stairs. Zane chased after me. Actually, you've been reborn, haven't you? I turned to look at him, not directly answering his question. Why? I've already given you what you wanted. What else do you want from me? Are you blaming me for letting her climb into someone else's bed? Enough. He pushed me roughly to the ground, his hands shaking with anger. I told you Maya was forced. If you keep talking nonsense, I'll rip your mouth off. Zane pointed at me, his face contorted with fury. Don't you dare do anything stupid. If you get in my way again, I'll make you regret it. Don't forget that house. The memory of the night I died stabbed at my heart, and I never wanted to revisit that night. With red eyes, I screamed, Zane, I never want to see you again. I knew he was afraid I would steal his opportunities and prevent him from achieving better success than in my previous life. If not for his good father-in-law and my father-in-law, I didn't believe in his abilities to succeed. From that moment, I severed all ties with him, with this family. The dorm provided by the TV station was small, just a bed, a desk, but it was peaceful. Late at night, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jensen standing there. He was holding a lunch box, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead, and offered me a gentle smile. I heard you moved to the dorm, and I figured you hadn't eaten. He didn't ask about my family, just opened the lunchbox. The familiar smell of home-cooked food filled the room, the scent instantly filling the small space. I looked at him, my eyes welling up. Eat, he said softly, handing me the chopsticks. I hungrily dug in, the warmth of the food sliding down my throat, the heat melting the coldness that had settled in my heart for so many years. He sat quietly beside me, watching me with eyes full of unspoken concern. Freed from the burden of family, my work flourished. It wasn't long before the station's leadership took notice of me. The better my life got, the worse the situation for the Nora family became. One day, my childhood friend Lily came to visit and told me about the state of the Nora family. You have no idea. Your brother used your parents' last bit of money, saying he was going to do big business. In the end, he lost every single investment. Now he's got a short temper, drinking and making a scene every day, fighting with your sister-in-law. The other day, I heard stuff being thrown around, and I think he even hit her. I blew on the hot steam in my cup, too lazy to even raise my eyelids. Without his status, who would show him any respect? What about my mother? Isn't she concerned about the money? I asked. Concerned? Lily laughed. Can she even control that? Your sister-in-law spends money like water. Your mom argues with her all the time. It's a fight every few days. Maya blamed everything on Mabel, who had once been the most favorable to her. Without money, she would point fingers at Mabel, calling her names. Zane, Maravalosai, with nothing to show for his life, cursed Mabel for having a useless son. My mother responded by attacking Mabel for being childless and a failure, calling her a hen that could only eat without laying eggs. The two of them argued from morning till night, becoming the laughingstock of the entire building. As for my father, he spent his days smoking in silence. Everything he had been proud of was gone, and the family was rotting at a terrifying speed. I listened, unmoved, and even wanted to laugh. This was what they deserved. On a rainy night, someone knocked on my dorm door. I peered through the peephole. In the dim light stood a bedraggled figure soaked to the bone. It was Zane. He was holding something, his voice hoarse. "Nora, I know you're in there. Open the door. I need to talk to you." I grasped the cold doorknob and finally opened it a crack. The cold wind and rain poured in. But I stood there, expressionless, looking at him. His eyes brightened, and he tried to push his way in, but I used my foot to block the door. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. Zane's face turned pale, and he raised the bag of biscuits in his hand. His voice was rough. "Nora, these are your favorite biscuits from when you were little." "I don't want them." A single sentence left him speechless. He didn't understand that the only food I could get was the one I liked, because my mother never wasted anything on me. At that moment, Jensen stepped out of the room. He didn't ask any questions. He simply moved forward, pulling me behind him and standing in front of the door. In a calm and steady voice, he addressed Zane. "Is there something you need, comrade? The rain's heavy. We need to rest." There was no aggression in his tone, but his protection was unwavering. Zane's gaze was fixed on my shoulder, where Jensen stood in front of me. His eyes, full of pleading, quickly shifted to jealousy, and finally to venomous hatred. "It's nothing. Just looking," he said, then quickly placed the box of cookies on the shoe cabinet by the door and rushed into the rain. Jensen's parents, both understanding retired teachers, immediately invited me to move into their home once they heard about my situation. Jensen's mother held my cold hand, her eyes red as she spoke softly. "Good girl. You've suffered. From now on, this is your home. We'll get the marriage license tomorrow. Just like in my previous life." They were pleased with our relationship. Our wedding was simple, with only close colleagues and friends invited. In my wedding dress, I looked at Jensen, who was smiling gently beside me, and felt like I was finally alive. On our wedding day, Zane showed up again. He had changed into new clothes, holding a box of beautifully packaged cookies, smiling as he handed it to me. "Nora, congratulations on your marriage." I politely accepted it. "Thank you." It seemed like he wanted to say something more, but he didn't. A few months later, I was pregnant. At my checkup, I ran into Zane's family, with my parents carefully supporting the heavily pregnant Maya. Maya arrogantly flaunted, "Nora, our Nora family is finally going to have an heir. And my parents are so happy." My parents smiled in a way they had never smiled at me before. "Come on, Maya. Sit down. Don't tire out the baby." Zane took the opportunity when everyone was separated to find me alone. He stammered, finally saying his real purpose. He rubbed his hands together, his gaze shifting nervously but filled with longing. "Nora, could you lend me some money?" I asked inferently, half inferently. "How much?" 50,000. He stared at me, as if afraid I would refuse. "Just hear me out first." He lowered his voice, pulling me into a corner, the mix of tobacco and cheap alcohol making me feel sick. "Do you remember the clothing trend from our past life? There's a batch of fabric being cleared out in the south. If we bring it back, we can sell it for 10 times the price. This is the chance for our family to turn things around." I looked at his manic expression and couldn't help but laugh. "So? I don't have any money." He forced the words out. "I need startup capital. 50,000. 50,000. In this day and age, that was a small fortune." He truly dared to ask. "Don't you remember how you treated me? You told me not to interfere with you." I turned to leave, but he went mad, throwing himself at my legs and kneeling in front of me. "Nora, please. I beg you. This is my last chance. Now that you're married well, and Jensen's family is well off, 50,000 is nothing to them. Please. Just this once." His cries made me feel nothing but disgust. "Now, Only when he no longer had the help from my past life did he realize how difficult things were. Zane. That's Jensen's family's money. Not mine. I won't give you a single cent. I struggled free from him, quickly walking away, leaving him with his furious, helpless shouts and curses. When I got home, I told Jensen and his parents about what had happened. His mother took my cold hand in hers, her gaze calm yet full of wisdom that seemed to see through everything. Child. We'll give him the money. I froze. And so did Jensen. His father nodded and said, give it to him. Dad? Mom? Jensen's mother gently patted my hand, her voice calm. But this is not a loan. This is a buyout. Nora's family has raised you for 20 years. This debt is something you can't escape, no matter how hard you try. As long as that relationship exists. Today he comes to kneel for money. Tomorrow he'll bring your parents to make a scene at the door. Rather than being entangled with them like leeches for a lifetime, it's better to settle it once and for all. She looked at me, each word heavy with meaning. Nora, we're offering this money. Not so Zane can get rich, but so you can find peace. This is to sever all ties with that family. Once and for all. This 50,000, and is your repayment for the nurturing debt from the Nora family. Looking at Jensen's mother, my eyes instantly filled with tears. Into lifetimes, I was finally experiencing how warm family can be, how full of wisdom and strength. The next day, I arranged to meet Zane. I pushed a cloth bag containing 50,000 and in cash in front of him. The moment he saw the money, his eyes glazed over, his breath heavy, like a wild animal seeing blood. He grabbed the bag, unzipping it greedily, heading sa sigh. His eyes fixed on the neatly stacked bills, trembling with excitement. Nora. You really gave it to me. I looked at him coldly. I don't want to make things difficult for my in-laws. This is my own money. I lied, and he believed it completely. He immediately swore with tears in his eyes. Nora. Don't worry. Once I make money, I'll pay you back with interest. I'll buy you a big house and a car. I stood up, cutting off his delusions. No need. I looked at his ecstatic face, my gaze icy. Zane, sai. I've given you the money. From now on, don't come to bother me again. He clutched the money like it was his entire world, muttering, I'm going to make it big now. Watching him in his frenzy, I remained expressionless. Do you like it? This kind of life? He froze for a moment, then said with confidence, if I succeeded once, having fulfilled my desire, I can do it again. I feel like the rebirth has made up for all my regrets. I'm very satisfied with my life now. Congratulations. My husband is waiting for me. I'll stop talking now. When my childhood friend came to visit, she was holding a net bag full of oranges, their sweet and sour fragrance filling the room. She was the last fragile link between me and that family. Your brother's been acting crazy lately. He's out all day, coming home late, all mysterious. When we ask him what he's up to, he just says, you'll see. I'm going to make everyone take me seriously. She peeled an orange, mimicking Zane's pompous tone, making a face. I think he's gone mad with greed. I smiled but said nothing. I knew exactly what he was up to. He had been like this in our past life. He always thought of himself as the chosen one, with the talent to change the world, just waiting for the right opportunity. And now, my mother-in-law had given him that opportunity. He had learned his lesson, no longer diving headfirst into trouble as he did before. Instead, he chose a project he thought was more secure, more discreet. He believed he was playing his cards well, maneuvering behind the scenes, unaware that some things can't be achieved without the right pieces in place. I didn't even need to ask around. I could easily guess that his shady business involved flipping scarce resources. The risks were high, but so were the profits, perfect for his character, ambitious, impatient, and always seeking shortcuts. That 50,000 was the fuel for his fantasy. The more he burned, the faster it would extinguish. My childhood friend mentioned that my father George had been looking much better lately. He kept telling everyone that his son had finally made something of himself. Though he was keeping it under wraps for now. He wore that pretentious, mysterious air as though he could already see the Nora family rising to greatness once again. The entire family was lost in this false hope, clinging to it like a drowning person grasping at a piece of straw. And I was the one standing on the shore, coldly watching them struggle. I felt nothing, no expectations, no curses. Because I knew, the ones who decided their fate were never me. It was their own deep-rooted greed and foolishness that would determine their end. Maya's life, on the other hand, was thriving. Her belly grew bigger by the day, and her standing in the Nora family rose along with it. Mabel had completely started to treat her like royalty. And all the past conflicts between them were wiped away, drowned by the thirst for a golden grandchild. You haven't seen your mother, she's been making chicken and fish soups for you 3 times a day. Always with a different recipe. My friend said. Maya goes out now with her chin up high, telling everyone, my husband Zane is doing big business now. Once the baby is born, I'll be the boss lady. My friend clicked his tongue in disbelief. She even complained to me, saying your brother won't let her spend money and insists on investing it all into his business. She says that once they make it big, she'll move the whole department store into their home. I could imagine the greedy, short-sighted look on Maya's face. A woman who couldn't even endure hardship, dreaming of overnight success. She and Zane were truly made for each other. They were like two grasshoppers tied to the same string, one charging forward, the other adding weight at the back. I even found myself, rather cruelly, looking forward to the day when Zane's business would fall apart, and Maya would be the first to turn on him. In their house, there had never been any true family affection, only the naked exchange of interests. Whoever brought glory and profit to the family was treated like a treasure. Whoever dragged the family down was treated like dirt. I had once been that dirt. But now it was their turn to experience it. And me? I had stepped out of that world of selfish interests. Mother-in-law was right, the 50. Aro bought me this piece. The storm was coming. My belly grew day by day. And the due date was fast approaching. My childhood friend called, her voice trembling. Nora, something big has happened at your brother's place. I sat on the balcony in a wicker chair, knitting a small sweater with my mother-in-law, my hands barely pausing. Tell me. My calmness caught her off guard. But her curiosity soon overcame her hesitation. Your brother wasn't home a few days ago. Maya started packing, rummaging through the drawers. And she found a savings book. 50,000. The amount was clearly written right there. Her voice cracked. And that number seemed to cut through the air, sharp enough to make my ears ache. Maya went crazy on the spot. She thought Zane had been hiding money from her, deceiving her. I could picture Maya's twisted face, the greed and anger from feeling betrayed overwhelming her already limited intelligence. She didn't think about what the money was for or what it meant to Zane. All she saw was betrayal. Her baby, the one she saw as her bargaining chip for everything, was now her capital. And she felt that capital was being ignored. And then? I asked softly, my knitting needles moving slowly through the yarn. Then she took all the money out. She went to the department store. My God. She looked like she was trying to buy the entire mall. She wore a gold chain as thick as a finger around her neck, gold bangles on her wrists. And she bought an imported coat. She kept telling everyone, my husband is in big business, this small amount of money is nothing. It was like she was desperate to make sure everyone knew she had money. She spent it like it might disappear tomorrow. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, a cold smirk tugging at my face. This was Maya. She was using the most foolish way to get back at her imagined betrayal and to reward herself for what she thought was a sacrifice. She didn't understand that what she was squandering wasn't just money, it was Zane's wild ambition. The only chance for their family to turn things around. She had lit the fuse that would blow up their future. When did Zane find out? Just now. My friend's voice suddenly dropped. It turns out he really did go into business. He was going to sign the contract and pay the final installment, but when he went to the bank to withdraw the money, there was nothing left. He turned white on the spot, went crazy and rushed home. The noise was like they were tearing the house apart. I could easily picture the scene that followed. Zane stormed in like a cornered beast, his eyes bloodshot. And there she was, the woman he had once married, wearing the new clothes, the gold chain gleaming, looking at herself in the mirror. "Where's the money?" Zane's voice was hoarse, like a broken gong. Maya jumped, but her shock quickly turned into a scream. "What money? That's so you are money. How dare you hide money from me?" She stood there, belly outstretched, as though it were her most impenetrable shield. "What's wrong with spending my own money? I'm carrying your Nora family's child. Eating your food. Using your money, what's the big deal? That was the final installment. That was life-saving money." Zane's voice cracked with desperation. His cry dinged with hopelessness. "Without that money, we're finished." "I don't care. The money's already spent." Maya scoffed, throwing her hands up. "Who told you to lie to me?" Two people bound by greed and stupidity finally started tearing each other apart. Verbal insults, curses, and then violence. My childhood friend told me she heard the sound of a bass shattering and a woman's scream coming from the house. Then came the man's beastly roar. One that even uncle and aunt couldn't stop. In the chaos, no one knew who pushed him. After that, there was no sound. My friend's voice trembled. I was so worried, so I cracked the door open a little. We saw Maya lying on the floor, completely still. Zane was kneeling beside her, completely stunned. My friend's voice broke with a sob. "Nora." There was blood everywhere. On the floor. The knitting needle I was holding dropped with a clatter. An unexpected turn of events. The sunlight outside was just right. Warm and bright. I lowered my head, gently touching my slightly rounded belly, feeling the steady, powerful heartbeat of the life inside me. See, retribution never misses its mark. It just waits for the perfect moment, striking in the most brutal way. From what my friend told me, an ambulance took Maya away. Zane followed the ambulance, as if he had lost his soul. My parents, George and Mabel, kept blaming him. Outside the emergency room, they paced nervously, but their worries seemed to stem more from the fear that their investment might be a lost cause. Several hours later, the doctor emerged, exhausted. "The mother and the child are both safe, but the mother suffered major blood loss, and the child was born prematurely. The situation isn't good, and the baby will need to be placed in an incubator." I could imagine the relief on my parents' faces when they heard safe, the weight lifting from their shoulders. But when the nurse brought out the tiny, kitten-like baby, everything changed. The nurse smiled and said, "Congratulations. Mother and daughter are both well. It's a beautiful girl. A girl." Those two words were like a bucket of ice-cold water, dousing all the warmth in the hallway. My friend told me that my father's smile froze on his face. My mother's reaction was even more telling. She didn't even reach out to take the baby. She just gave it a distant glance. "How is it a girl?" She hissed the words, poisoning what little joy was left. To my parents, Nora family's hope, which they once saw as a golden treasure, had instantly turned into a worthless money-losing burden. The next day, the debt collectors called our house. On the first call, my father answered, still full of vigor. But when the person on the other end mentioned the penalty and a string of numbers my father had never heard before, he was stunned. Then came the second, third call. Those former friends were now like the Grim Reapers, coming to collect their due. It was only then that they realized Zane hadn't helped the family recover. Instead, he had dragged them even deeper into a pit. The huge compensation debts and unpaid favors piled up like a mountain, crushing their last shred of dignity. When Maya woke up in the hospital, she completely lost it. She lay in the bed, refusing to look at her premature daughter, not allowing the nurse to bring the baby to her. "Take it away. Get that harbinger of death away from me." She screamed and cursed Zane, cursed the family. "Zane, Merara Sai. You're a waste. You tricked me. You ruined my life. I want a divorce. I never want to see you losers again." My mother, Mabel, had a complete 180-degree change in attitude. Since it was a useless girl she had, she couldn't be bothered to pretend anymore. The two women had a huge argument in the hospital room. "How dare you speak? If it weren't for you, would our family be like this?" That money was always ours. Is it wrong for me to spend my family's money? You useless hen. A harbinger of misfortune. The house became a living hell. The innocent newborn baby became the outlet for everyone's frustrations. She was so fragile. Her cries as faint as a mosquito's hum. And only her father occasionally took care of her. Maya cursed her as a debt collector. My mother thought her unlucky. My father sighed constantly. And Zane? He had completely turned into a walking corpse. A drunkard. During the day, he hid at home. At night, he went out to drink. When he came back drunk, he either remained silent or fought with the screaming Maya. The house was filled with the ugliest of scenes. Day and night. My childhood friends said, "Nora, your family now. It's even worse than before." I gently stroked my growing belly, feeling the peace and joy that new life brought. I smiled softly. Yes, it was terrifying. 3 days after my son was born. The sunlight was just right. My mother, Mabel, arrived, holding a basket of eggs. Her smile more fake than a cry. Jensen's mother was carefully tucking in my blanket, the house filled with the warmth a newborn brings. But Mabel's appearance was like a cold wind, scattering all the warmth away. She ignored the greeting from Jensen's mother and went straight for the crib. Ah, my first grandson. This nose. These eyes. He really looks like the Nora family. She was praising him with her words. But her calculating eyes were like hooks, fixed on my son. After a few polite words, she rubbed her hands together, leaned closer to my bed, lowered her voice, and spoke in a tone as slick as a snake. Out of politeness, Jensen's mother invited her for lunch. "Nora, you're a mother now. You should understand." I looked at her coldly, waiting for her next words. "Your brother. You know he's not doing well. He finally had a child, but that useless Maya gave birth to a girl. A sickly one. So unlucky." She spat on the ground, disgust writ and all over her face. "Your brother's life is ruined. And our Nora family's bloodline." Mabel's voice changed, almost pleading. "Please. Nora. You're still young. You can still have children. Will you adopt this child to your brother? The Nora family cannot lose its heirs. Once your brother has his own children, you can take him back." The air froze instantly. Even Jensen's mother, usually so calm, scowled, slamming her cup onto the table. I looked at Mabel's face, which practically screamed entitlement. And suddenly, I laughed. "Have you lost your mind? What do you think of my child?" She froze. I said, "Have you lost your mind?" I propped myself up and sat up, my gaze sharp as a knife. "This is my son. He has nothing to do with you or your useless son. You want a grandson? Let her give birth to one. If she can't, then let her die childless. Get out." Mabel's face turned the color of liver. You ungrateful wretch. Who do you think I'm doing this for? Isn't it for your brother? Your Nora family is rotten to the core." I sneered. "Get out. Don't pollute the air in my house. You've gone too far." Mabel shrieked, and actually lunged for the crib. Jensen's mother was quick to react, grabbing her and blocking her with shaking hands. "Mother-in-law, do you have no shame? Is this how a mother acts? This is our family's business. I'm taking my grandson with me today." With all their strength, Jensen's parents pushed Mabel out the door. Once outside, Mabel sat down in the hallway and began to wail loudly. "No sense of decency. I raised this ungrateful daughter. She gives birth to a son and forgets her family. She's climbed too high." The sound of screaming drew a crowd of neighbors, all pointing and whispering at my door. My mother-in-law's face turned pale with fury, while I lay in bed, utterly calm, only finding the whole thing absurd. That farce didn't end until Jensen came home. When he saw Mabel thrashing about on the floor, his expression came to steel. Word by word, he said, "Auntie, please don't ever come here again." But Mabel's madness didn't stop there. A few days later, my mother-in-law went out to buy groceries, and my father-in-law left to run errands. The house was quiet, just me and my sleeping child. Suddenly, I heard a faint click, the sound of the door lock turning. I thought my mother-in-law had returned. But it was her. She had actually picked the lock and broken in. Mabel's face was twisted with hatred. She stormed toward me, and I instinctively shielded the baby in my arms. Her fingers dug viciously into my hand. I shouted toward the empty living room. "Jensen! Call the police." Mabel's face went ghostly white. She panicked and yanked hard. I stumbled, nearly falling. And in that instant, she snatched the baby from my arms. The child wailed. I lunged forward with all my strength, clutching her arm and screaming at the top of my lungs. "Help! Somebody help! She's trying to steal my baby." My cry shattered the silence of the stairwell. The neighbor across the hall was the first to rush out. And soon, Manada lost eye. Doors opened upstairs and downstairs. Mabel completely lost control. She struggled to shake me off, shouting hysterically, "You lunatic! I'm your mother. I don't have a mother who steals children." I hissed, holding her in an iron grip and staring straight into her terrified face. "The police are almost here. You can explain it to them yourself." When the police arrived, it was the final straw that broke everything apart. Caught red-handed, Mabel was taken away, still screaming curses at me as she was dragged off. That was the last time I ever saw her. That night, Jensen held me without a word, only tightening his arms around me as though to anchor us both. The next day, we made a decision. To sell the house and leave this place behind. Leave this city filled with nightmares and pain. A week later, the three of us boarded a southbound train. I left a letter with my childhood friend, asking her to tell the Noor family, "I'm gone. From now on, we are strangers, our paths will never cross again." As the train began to move, I looked back once at the city fading into the distance. My heart was utterly still. Happy New Year, Nora. 5 years passed. It was New Year's Eve in Shenzhen. Outside the window, fireworks exploded against the night sky. Inside the room, Jensen was helping our 6-year-old son build Lego blocks, while my in-laws cradled our 1-year-old daughter, rocking her gently. My phone rang. It was my childhood friend. I stepped onto the balcony and closed the glass door behind me, shutting out the laughter inside. "Happy New Year, Nora," he said. "Cut it out," I replied lightly, leaning against the railing, watching the fireworks with little emotion. He fell silent for a moment, then spoke hesitantly. "Nora, there's something. I don't know if I should tell you." "Go ahead." "The Nora family is finished," he sighed. "Your sister-in-law divorced Zane 2 years ago. She ran off with the last of the family's money. And their daughter, your little niece, passed away last winter." My fingers tight and slightly around the phone. "She was born premature," he continued softly. "Her health was always fragile. Then she fell ill, had a fever that wouldn't go down. They couldn't even afford a few hundred yuan for the hospital, so they just let it drag on. After she died, Zane completely lost his mind. He smashed up your old house, screaming that your parents had ruined his life, that if they hadn't favored sons over daughters, if they'd had a boy, they wouldn't have lost everything. Then he disappeared. Some people saw him under a bridge, fighting with vagrants over food. As for your parents, the house was repossessed long ago. They're renting a small place in the northern slums now. Your mother washes dishes. Your father guards a gate. They've aged beyond recognition." I listened quietly, as though hearing a stranger's story. The night wind was cold. "I understand," I said finally. "Nora, I'll send you some money." I interrupted. "Don't mention me. Find a way to give it to them anonymously. Buy them something warm to eat and wear. Don't let them freeze." I paused, my voice dropping to a whisper. "This will be the last time." When I hung up, I didn't go back inside right away. My friend had said that after Zane went mad, he kept muttering the same words over and over. Why did it turn out like this? It wasn't supposed to be like this. I could have out. Now he knew what hardship was. What kind of woman Maya truly was. And what ruin his greed would bring. This was the path he had chosen himself. Jensen opened the door and came out, draping a coat over my shoulders. "Careful. It's cold." I clutched the coat and asked quietly, "Honey, if people could start over again." He bent down, smiling tenderly. Marrying you was my greatest blessing, our family's blessing. No matter how many times I'd always find you again. My husband is as indifferent as a chrysanthemum. My parents pulled strings to find him a job. Yet he flew into a rage, yelling about how bureaucracy harms society. He got into trouble and couldn't graduate. I gave gifts to his supervisor to smooth things over, but he turned around and reported us, claiming I was abetting unethical practices. I slaved away to run our family, but all he said was, "Don't be so utilitarian." For 60 years of marriage, his only contribution was refusing to fight for anything, to strive for anything. Yet before the 7th day of mourning, a traditional Chinese ritual to honor the deceased, had even passed after my death, he couldn't wait to marry his first love. He wrote, 60 years apart, like scattered swallows. Even a letter can hardly capture the melody of longing. That anger, it brought me back to life. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day I got my marriage certificate at the age of 23. Let's pause the marriage. I'm going to take the postgraduate entrance exam. To win me back, he said. I've said it so many times, I have nothing to hide from Yvonne. I rolled my eyes and sneered. What the hell are you talking about, Brother Kyan? One I died of illness at the age of 83. Before the 7th day of mourning was over, my husband of 60 years, Leo, held a grand wedding to marry his first love, Yvonne. It made me laugh bitterly. Yvonne was far inferior to me even in her youth. And in old age, she looked even more hideous. You old fool, were you that desperate? How could you even bring yourself to do this? On second thought, there had always been so many suspicious gaps between Leo and Yvonne. They'd stayed in touch on and off for 60 years. And finally they'd outlasted me. He brought her into the house I had bought, and invited so many guests that the living room couldn't even hold them all. To make space for their wedding photos and red candles, a symbol of wedding joy, he simply had my portrait, still fresh from my funeral, moved out. Leo didn't look the least bit like a man who'd just lost his wife. His face was beaming with joy. Of course it was. He was marrying the woman he'd loved his whole life. I still remembered our wedding day. He'd said, "No need for a banquet. My marriage is just a personal matter. There's no need to waste everyone's time and energy." Now I realized he'd probably looked down on me back then. He thought marrying someone as money-obsessed as me was shameful. So he had to do it quietly to protect his reputation. To thank the guests, Leo played the piano while Yvonne danced to the music. His playing was slow, her steps unsteady. They looked just like a couple who'd endured hardships and finally reunited. In 60 years of marriage to me, he'd never played the piano for me even once. I'd asked him to before, but he'd said, the piano should only be played for a soulmate. Turns out, his only soulmate had always been Yvonne. Leo, your late wife is watching you from above. I wanted to scream, to shout, but no sound would come out. Then came the speech part. His eyes filled with tears as he said, Minerva was always so utilitarian. I've lived a tired life all these years, never following my true heart. Yvonne has a gentle, quiet nature. She was always the right one for me. If Minerva hadn't forced this marriage, we would have been together long ago. Luckily, having fulfilled my obsession, it's not too late now. Yvonne, I love you. In this life, I am only your husband. The two old lovebirds clasped hands, gazing at each other's wrinkled faces. Leo wore a look of tenderness I'd never seen in 60 years. In that moment, I felt utterly ridiculous. After we married, I called him husband. But he'd frown and tell me to use his name. Don't be so mushy. In my lifetime, I never heard him say I love you to me. After my death, he said it to another woman. Finally, having fulfilled my obsession, amid everyone's blessings, he wrote in neat, formal calligraphy, 60 years apart like scattered swallows. Even a letter can hardly capture the melody of longing. With one sentence, he erased all my years of hard work. Every minute of those 60 years she'd been thinking of his first love. A soul shouldn't have tears. But as I left, I suddenly felt my cheeks grow wet. Well done, Minerva. You really were blind and stupid. I sobbed until my heart ached. Those 60 years of being let down would never come back. Suddenly, my heart clenched in agony. I fainted from the pain. When I woke up again, I was back on the day we got our marriage certificate. I was only 23. 2. I came from a well-off family. My father worked in the transportation sector. And my mother, from a family of scholars, was a renowned painter. Leo grew up in poverty. He'd gotten into University A after testing out of a small county. I'd always admired his quiet, indifferent attitude toward fame and fortune. I'd chased him for a year before he agreed to be with me. When I took him to meet my parents, they refused to approve the marriage. Leo stood up and left on the spot, telling me not to contact him anymore. He didn't want to be seen as someone who curried favor with the wealthy. I knelt in front of my parents, crying and begging. I assured them repeatedly that he was an ambitious, outstanding young man, and that after marriage, he'd never rely on my family. As soon as my parents relented, I rushed to tell Leo the good news. He responded coldly, "Oh? You didn't have to go to all that trouble. It's not like I was dying to marry you." Back then, I thought he must be angry. I did everything I could to cheer him up. Finally, having fulfilled my, he reluctantly said, "Fine, having fulfilled my say." Then, we got married right after graduation. He tried to find a job, but he was always fired before he even finished his probation. He thought highly of himself, believing that as a graduate of a top university, he shouldn't have to do menial work. He also loved meddling in other people's business. Whenever he saw a supervisor scolding a subordinate, he'd jump in to interfere. His resume wasn't impressive enough for the city of A. My parents, though they'd said they'd never help us, quietly pulled strings behind the scenes, hoping he'd get a good job so I could live a better life. But he managed to offend all of my parents' connections. In the end, no decent private or state-owned company would hire him. He couldn't find a job in A at all. Yet he still complained at home. "Those people are so arrogant, they're nothing but parasites on society. I'd rather lead a simple life than compromise my principles." I felt sorry for him. Why not try further studies? I'll take care of supporting the family. So he lived off me eating my food, using my money, and went back to school. While working on his doctorate, he clashed with his supervisor over a trivial matter and almost couldn't graduate. I dropped everything to apologize to his supervisor and even gave expensive gifts. But he went behind my back and reported the supervisor for accepting bribes. In the end, the situation became a mess, and my father had to step in to fix it. He frowned at me, as if I were the one in the wrong. He looked disappointed. "You're just encouraging unethical behavior." This time, I finally snapped. "What have you done for this family since we got married?" He stood up abruptly. "All you care about is money, money. 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 How could I have married someone like you? Our son was born. And you're never home to take care of him. You're always out doing God knows what. This is who I am. Leo. If you're so vain and obsessed with power, go chase it on your own." Later, I felt regret. I thought I'd been too harsh, that I'd hurt his pride. I even swallowed my pride and apologized. To make it up to him, when he was up for a promotion, I begged my uncle, who had connections, to help. To put it plainly, his smooth, successful life was all thanks to me. Without me, he would never have become the famous professor known far and wide. Of course he could afford to be indifferent as a chrysanthemum, but was the one carrying the burden of supporting the whole family. I was the one who took all the shady shortcuts for him. Of course he never had to humble himself. I was the one who endured all the grievances. But then I died. He'd achieved fame and success. He'd been promoted, made money, and lost his wife. It was the perfect time to rekindle his romance with his first love. "Just sign here," the staff member said, handing me a pen to sign the marriage registration form. I glanced sideways. Leo, sitting next to me, had a cold, expressionless face, no trace of wedding joy at all. He'd been like this for 60 years of marriage, never once smiling at me. I gently touched my face. The wrinkles from decades of hard work were gone. My skin was smooth and tender. My wasted youth had come back. I took a deep breath, tossed the pen back on the table, and said, "Let's put the marriage on hold. I'm going to take the postgraduate entrance exam." For the first time, Leo's usually deadpan face showed emotion. He frowned. "What's your problem?" 3 simple words, and suddenly, I was the one being unreasonable. Once. Just a frown from him would make me back down and rush to cheer him up. It happened so many times that I even started to believe I was always in the wrong. That I was letting down the aloof and detached Leo. But I'd been given a second chance at life. I wasn't going to put up with this anymore. I didn't bother to explain. I grabbed my bag and walked out. To my surprise, Leo, uncharacteristically flustered, hurried after me. Minerva. Wait. Let's talk this through. He grabbed my wrist. I shuddered all over. To be honest, just touching him made me sick to my stomach. I wanted to throw up. I think I made myself clear, I said, yanking my hand away and wiping it on my pants. He noticed the gesture. His pupils contracted. You're not going to marry me anymore? I forced back the urge to curse. There were too many people around. If we made a scene, it would end up in the news. I said, I'm going to take the postgraduate exam. You'll understand, right? I stared straight at him. His face stiffened. Yes. Of course. I smiled in satisfaction and turned to walk out of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Bathing in the warm sunlight, I finally believed I was truly alive again. Those 60 years of marriage, had they not been a disgusting cage for me? 3. I didn't break up with him, not because I still had feelings for him. He tormented me for 60 years. No. I was going to drag him into the abyss with my own hands. Saying I'd take the postgraduate exam wasn't an excuse. Either. After living through my past life, I understood deeply how important it was for women to get more education. I'd always had excellent grades and won awards in various competitions. Getting into graduate school through recommendation would have been a piece of cake. But to marry him, I'd given up my spot in the recommendation program. I'd found a job early and worked diligently to support the family. And all I got in return was his 60 years apart like scattered swallows. What a fancy way to insult me. You'd need a good education just to understand how mean it was. There were still more than half a year left before the postgraduate exam. It wasn't too late. Mom called me to ask about the situation. Didn't you insist on marrying him? What's going on now? It had been a long time since I'd heard her voice. And a sour ache welled up in my chest. I'd been such a foolish, love-struck fool, worrying my parents sick. Mom, I want to further my education while I'm young. It'll be useful later, I said. A memory of my past life flashed back. I'd had a crucial promotion opportunity, with excellent performance, but had to stop short because my bachelor's degree was the minimum requirement. Just thinking about it made my teeth grind with resentment. My parents were deeply relieved. They quickly sent me money, telling me to sign up for a postgraduate exam cram school right away, and not let the progress slip, even if I didn't work. My family's assets were enough to support me for a lifetime. But Leo was in a sorry state without me supporting him. He could barely even afford to eat. We had no contact at all. With his pride, there was no way he'd take the initiative to call me. In my past life, I'd been frantic with worry about him. But in this life, I'd grown indifferent. The more I'd pampered him before, the more arrogant he'd become, as if he was someone truly important. Now that he ignored me, and I didn't ask after him, it was a perfect match. It only took a week for him to cave. He called me, his voice cold and rigid. That's enough with this act. Playing hard to get us cute to a point. But know when to stop. I'm too busy preparing for the postgraduate exam as my top priority, I replied casually. He fell silent for a long time before saying, we can study together. I can even help you. We'd both graduated, so we couldn't live in the dorm anymore. He didn't even have money for food, let alone rent. I almost laughed. But I remember my GPA was higher than yours. I don't think I need your help. It seemed he held back his anger again. I don't have money for food, he admitted. How ironic. He'd hated it when I mentioned money before, because I'd always taken care of all financial issues. Now it was his turn to panic about money. That's okay even if you have money. It can't be eaten like food. I threw back the words he'd once said to me. You can find some food that doesn't cost anything. My retort finally made him snap. You think you're great just because your family has money? Why do you always have to hit people where it hurts? I sighed. You have hands and feet, why not go work? It was a rhetorical question. If he could stand the hardship of working, he wouldn't have been poor in the first place. Don't think I can't survive without you, Minerva. He snarled before hanging up. Facts proved he really couldn't. He went to a fast food restaurant run by a friend of mine. The friend, out of consideration for me, reluctantly hired him. A day later, my friend complained to me. Leo had been working as a waiter and delivery person, but he'd mixed up a customer's drink. The customer had complained a little their words weren't particularly nice, and Leo had dumped the entire cup of drink over the customer's head. I asked my friend to send me the surveillance footage, then posted it online myself. Within a day of going live, the video had been shared over 10 million times. And Leo earned a new nickname, Fast Food Lunatic. My friend fired Leo, but I thought that wasn't enough. Deduct a month's salary from him too as compensation for the restaurant. My friend chuckled. What's wrong? Don't feel bad for your good boyfriend anymore? This means he worked a whole month for nothing. If I let him get away with taking that money, I wouldn't be Minerva. Leo was kicked out without a penny. Originally, having fulfilled my obsession, he'd had free room and board at the restaurant. But now he had nowhere to go entirely. He contacted me again, Minerva. I tried working, but it didn't work out. Every time he'd messed up a job in the past, he'd call me in that cloying tone. Back then, I'd been bewitched one word from him, and my heart would soften, and I'd clean up his messes for him. That's okay, you're famous now. You could do live streaming to sell products, I said. Wasn't that a way to make a name for himself? Seeing that I wouldn't play along and was even mocking him, he ground his teeth. How could I have ever been with a woman like you? I didn't care who he chose to be with anymore. I was tired of indulging his arrogance. As expected, he went back to Yvonne, the girl he'd always gotten along with. Yvonne studied at a second-tier university across the street from ours. Though the schools were only separated by a road, their rankings were worlds apart. Leo was a genius from the mountains, and Yvonne, having gotten into university, was also considered outstanding in her own right. She was a year younger than Leo, and he'd spent a lot of time helping her with her studies. I'd been too naive, truly believing they were just pure friends. Fate had a twisted sense of humor. When I went back to school to take care of some business, I ran into Yvonne bringing food to Leo, and the three of us crossed paths. I wanted nothing to do with them, so I lifted my feet to walk past. But Yvonne stopped me. Minerva, isn't this enough? Leo has been through so much lately. I lifted my eyelids slightly. Has being a homewrecker addled your brain? Do you really dare to come and morally blackmail the legitimate girlfriend? At my words, tears welled up in her eyes. How could you say that? Leo stepped in front of her to protect her. Come at me if you have a problem. You're just being paranoid. Yvonne and I are completely innocent, and I'm tired of saying this. For I didn't want to argue either. But he was asking for it. What the hell are you talking about, brother Strong? Stop pretending to be such a good person. If I hadn't seen with my own eyes how sweet their late life romance was after I died, I would have been fooled by Leo again this time. Just looking at them annoyed me. They turned my once good life into a joke. Thankfully, I'd been given a second chance to start over, instead of being sent straight to the afterlife. Otherwise, my best friend would have laughed at me to death, and my parents would have scolded me relentlessly. I walked away without looking back, not noticing the venomous glint in Yvonne's eyes. She was good at singing and dancing, had a pure-looking face, and was considered a campus belle at her university. After suffering such a great wrong at my hands, there was no way she'd let it go unavenged. She wrote a 10,000 word essay on her moments. She didn't mention my name, but every sentence was about me detailing how I'd bullied others because of my family's power, picking on an innocent girl from a small town. Her lackeys all reposted it, including Leo. With his obsession with fighting for justice, how could he not help the woman he liked the most? Leo already had public attention, so the matter was posted online again. Netizens commented, "We wronged the fast food lunatic." It turns out he was driven to desperation by his vain girlfriend. The talented man was forced to work as a waiter. That crazy woman is so hateful she bites anyone she can and frames a pure, innocent girl. The incident even escalated to claims that top students from prestigious schools looked down on students from ordinary universities. Word reached the school and my parents. I was called in for a talk. And Mom rushed over to be with me. How did things get so bad? Mom asked, taking my hand with a worried look on her face after the talk. Without actual evidence. The school wouldn't punish me for a mere essay. But it would damage my reputation and interfere with my postgraduate exam and civil service exam preparations. Don't worry. Mom. The innocent don't need to get stuck in the trap of proving their innocence. You and Dad stay out of the cell, let you know if I need anything. I said. Yvonne was a small-time internet celebrity. She occasionally did live streams and made money from the gifts her fans sent her. She deliberately leaked my personal information. My phone was bombarded with calls. And my social media accounts were flooded with abusive messages. When I got back, I pulled out my phone's SIM card and logged out of all social media platforms. I got a new phone number and created a bunch of new accounts. I carefully checked Yvonne's accounts and found she often showed off gifts from her fans. I took screenshots of everything. My best friend told me she had Yvonne on WeChat. Looking through Yvonne's moments, I noticed some items she posted looked exactly like the ones that had mysteriously disappeared from me: a bracelet, a pair of earrings, even the birthday gift Leo had given me last year. Last year, he'd given me a necklace. It wasn't expensive, but he'd saved up for it by cutting back on his own expenses. I'd been touched and worn it every day. Then one day, after he came to my house, it disappeared. I'd hated the dorm conditions. So I lived off campus. Occasionally, I'd ask Leo to come over to my place and cook for him. But he'd always be reluctant, saying, "It's improper for an unmarried couple to go to each other's homes." I thought we weren't living in the King dynasty anymore, we were a normal couple. So what was the big deal? I thought back for a long time and realized, every time Leo had come to my house, some small pieces of jewelry would go missing. I wasn't one to tidy up much. So my room was messy. I just thought they got lost, they weren't valuable anyway. But finding out my boyfriend had been stealing my things to give to someone else? That was disgusting. We don't need to exchange gifts on holidays. You don't lack these things anyway, holidays are just consumer traps. He'd said. Yet he'd happily accepted every gift I gave him. He'd only skimmed on the gifts he gave me. Last year, when he bought me that necklace, I'd even thought he'd turned over a new leaf. Never in a million years would I have guessed he'd been planning to recycle it. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind at such a young age. The signs had been so obvious. But I'd noticed nothing in my past life, maybe because I'd been too overconfident in our relationship. I was pounding my chest, seething with anger at my own stupidity, when someone knocked on the door. 5 through the video doorbell. I saw Leo standing outside with a pile of things in his hands. The doorbell had an intercom function, and I had no intention of opening the door. Well, if it isn't a rare guest, I said. I'd begged him to come over before, and he'd refused. He glanced around nervously, like someone sneaking into a shady massage parlor and fearing being seen by an acquaintance. I had no idea being in a relationship with me was such a burden to him. "Open the door first," he said. I was speechless. "Put the things down and leave. Minerva. I came to check on you," he said, forcing down his temper as if he was condescending to do me a favor. Hit someone and then offer them a sweet. This trick wasn't even his invention. How could he be so sure I'd fall for it? "I'm not dead, you can rest easy," I replied. He couldn't keep up the pretense for more than 3 sentences. "That's enough. You insulted Yvonne for no reason and got what you deserved. I'll make Yvonne clarify things. But don't you dare do this again. After all, we're still boyfriend and girlfriend. You should stop preparing for the postgraduate exam to hurry up and marry me. Settle down early. What's the use of a woman having a degree? You need a family. I'll move in tomorrow, let's try living together first." What a generous offer. I laughed. Who do you think you are? Do you really believe netizens will trust whatever you and your little girlfriend say? What they want is evidence. You talk so much. But aren't you still being called the fast food lunatic? He turned red with anger. "I'm giving you a way out. And you're refusing to take it. Do you really think your family's stinking money can cover this up? You're actually playing the victim now? What hardships have you been through? Isn't Yvonne the one who's been wronged?" I didn't want to waste any more breath on him. I called security. And soon there was a commotion outside. Suddenly, he pressed his face against the door and shouted, "Minerva, did you come back too?" My heart skipped a beat. There was something weird about that question. My phone suddenly pushed an article to me, with the title "People May Awaken Memories That Don't Belong to Themselves When Stimulated." Flap! The phone fell to the ground. Just now, I'd made him furious on purpose. And then security guards had come and chased him away like they were catching a thief. He'd never suffered such a humiliating insult before. Maybe he'd been overwhelmed by anger. And under that extreme emotion, he'd awakened the memories of his past life. Not long after he left, I picked up my phone again and found that all of Yvonne's moments WeChat's social feature had been hidden. It was too late for him to wake up, it already saved all of them. A surge of excitement suddenly welled up in me. Winning against him by relying on information asymmetry wasn't much of a skill. Wouldn't it be even more thrilling to have him, who'd also been reborn, trampled under my feet? Under such fair conditions. What new tricks could my indifferent as a chrysanthemum huzz and possibly pull off? Time was pressing. So I quickly compiled the records of all the expenses I'd covered for Leo and the screenshots of Yvonne's moments into a PDF. I had a habit of keeping receipts for everything I bought, so I could find evidence for every single thing he'd stolen. One coincidence meant nothing, but consistency across all items spoke volumes. During the days when Leo and I were on bad terms, I hadn't been idle either. I'd followed him around from time to time to see what he was up to. He was a total kept man through and through. He could never change that. When he couldn't mooch off me for food and drinks anymore, he latched onto Yvonne instead. I'd quietly taken a lot of photos of them together. I went through all the gifts Yvonne had shown off on her moments. And every time, luxury bags were placed in the most prominent positions. These weren't things an ordinary fan could afford. She was just a small influencer with only a few thousand followers. And she spent a lot. To where could she have gotten so much money to buy these bags? I sent photos of all these bags to my best friend, who had a sharp eye for luxury goods, and could tell real ones from fakes at a glance. Oh my god. All of these are real. But they look familiar. Wayne seems to have bought these bags before. I heard he gave them to his girlfriend. My best friend was always up on all the gossip. Wayne had been our classmate since childhood, and he was a wealthy second-generation heir. I checked his posts and found that he had indeed posted about buying bags for his girlfriend. After cross-referencing them one by one, the matches were almost perfect. Leo had been reborn, so it would be hard to take action against him, but Yvonne should be easy to intimidate. Once I figured that out, I put my original phone card back in and added Yvonne's WeChat openly. The message she sent was filled with complacency. "Sister Minerva, are you here to apologize? It's okay, I forgive you." I curled my lips into a smile and replied, "I'm afraid it's you who'll be on your knees begging me to spare you." I sent the PDF over and added, "Take a good look. You can spout lies while playing the victim, but I have evidence. Also, did you ever think that Wayne and I were elementary school classmates? Do you want me to send the stuff about you and Leo to him? You know better than me what Wayne would do if he found out you were using his money to keep another man." Soon after, my phone rang. She was calling me. "Minerva, what do you want?" Her voice was trembling violently. I could tell the fish had taken the bait. First, don't tell Leo anything about today. Second, apologize to me on all your social media platforms. Okay. I'll agree to both. I'll cut ties with Leo," she begged repeatedly. Unfortunately, Hetty fulfilledly, I never kept my word when it came to green tea girls and sincere, manipulative women. I made up exaggerated details about Leo and Yvonne's relationship, then sent all our chat records and the audio of our call to Wayne. He was out drinking at the time, and I heard he'd gotten so angry that he smashed the table on the spot. Yvonne was definitely in for a hard time now. 6. This wealthy heir not only forced Yvonne to apologize to me, but also ordered her to go lied and clarify everything, admitting that she'd lied about her relationship with Wayne, cheated his feelings, and falsely accused me. Wayne even went to Yvonne's university. The amount of money involved was so large that her actions constituted fraud, and she was immediately expelled. She'd struggled so hard to get into university and escape the poverty of her small mountain village. But in one day, she was back to square one. This time, Leo had learned his lesson. He kept his mouth shut and said nothing. All the anger from netizens was directed at Yvonne, while he hid away nicely and didn't suffer much backlash. After things had calmed down for a while, he released a statement. It was his classic line, "I only saw her as a younger sister." He talked about how he'd helped her get into university, and claimed that after that, all their interactions had been proper and that there was no overly intimate behavior between them. Surprisingly, some so-called friends even took his side and spoke up for him. He hadn't wasted his second life lately. He'd learned how to curry favor. He'd abandoned his former aloofness and taken the initiative to treat his roommates and clubmates to meals. The money was definitely stolen from Yvonne. So in essence, he was using Wayne's money to clear his own name. As the saying goes, he who takes less food has to soften his words since they'd eaten his treats. They couldn't very well refuse to speak up for him. Netizens ended up labeling him as an innocent good man who'd been deceived by Yvonne. One day, when I just went downstairs, I saw Leo leaning against the wall waiting for me. I glanced behind me. There was a surveillance camera only 1 meter away. And the security booth was also nearby. He wouldn't dare do anything to me here. "What do you want?" I spoke first. Leo stepped closer. And there was a different aura about him. "Minerva, I have to admit, you were a good wife. You changed me a lot. And those tactics of yours were really effective." He'd always thought highly of himself. And now that he'd been reborn, his arrogance was off the charts. I smiled faintly. "Of course. Trash like you only picks up what others leave behind. Do you want me to chew it up and feed it to you directly?" "Don't be so tough talking now," Leo said, his composure far better than that of a young man after all. He was mentally an octogenarian. "You're just angry that I married Yvonne after you died. I already know I was wrong. This time, if we work together as husband and wife, things will be completely different from our past life." He held out his hand to me. I directly spat the chewed gum in my mouth into his palm. "Don't put gold on your own face." After failing to get a promotion in my past life, I'd started my own business. And unexpectedly, it had been very successful. Things had gone smoothly for me. And by extension, Leo had also led a prosperous life. No, he wasn't the poor boy who climbed out of the mountains anymore. He was used to a life of comfort and couldn't stand any hardship. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been pretending to get along with me. Making money the right way was too hard. Mooching off women was much easier. That was the lesson he'd learned after living for 80 years. Leo glared at me angrily. He didn't know whether to throw away the gum in his hand or keep it. "Minerva, this is the last time. Just you wait." He turned and left. He was just like that chewed up gum, useless and sticky. He couldn't afford to take a year off to study for the postgraduate exam. So he had to find a job first. But what I didn't expect was that he'd saved up money by living frugally to pursue Cynthia, a young lady from a prominent family, and then smoothly got a job at her family's company. Congratulations to him. I supposed at least he had a good-looking face to rely on. But a leopard can't change its spots. His obsession with being a Phoenix man, a man who marries into a wealthy family to climb the social ladder, would probably never change. Even in 3 lifetimes. The only way to stop him from harming others was to send him to hell. To be reborn as a lowly beast. Cynthia didn't care about the rumors or his past. She firmly believed there must be a misunderstanding. And that her dear boyfriend was a good man who had no desire to compete with others. She even made a special trip to find me and asked to meet at a CAF. 7 Minerva. You and Leo had some unpleasantness in the past. But that's all behind us now. Cynthia said. She was referring to the fact that, because of me, Leo had always struggled to get ahead in his career. Before, no company wanted him. Now that the Cynthia family had hired him, he still couldn't bring in any results. It was hard for President Cynthia's family member in charge of the company to justify keeping him, especially since he was demanding a high salary. After I got into graduate school, my supervisor often took me into his research team to work on projects. Leo, overestimating his abilities, always liked to compete with my team. He was useless. But he just couldn't see it himself. In his past life, His title of professor had been a sham. He'd gotten it all with my money and connections. His so-called experience only applied in laboratories and classrooms. It couldn't be put into large-scale production at all, which caused the Cynthia family to lose money constantly. I always felt that after being reborn, Leo had become blindly confident. He might even be less motivated than he was before. No matter how hard the Cynthia family backed him, he still couldn't sign a single deal. I put down my coffee. The rich, bitter taste lingered in my mouth. Don't worry about it. I just don't help him cut corners like I used to because now you're here to do that. Of course. My parents felt sorry for me. After finding out what a terrible person Leo was, they'd done a lot to sabotage him behind the scenes. I hadn't stopped them. There was no point in wasting their good intentions. Anyway, Leo and I are planning to get married. Let's just let bygones be bygones. I'll apologize to you on his behalf for the things he did wrong, Cynthia said, standing up and bowing to me. I stood up too, and stepped aside to avoid accepting her bow. Leo's gotten smarter. He's learned how to curry favor now. My eyes fell on the ring on her finger. She smiled awkwardly. Yes, he's very good to me. If he's so good to you, would he put a difference? Cynthia awkwardly covered her finger. He must have been tricked by someone. I'll go talk to him about it when I get back. He's a man. If he can't even apologize to me himself and has to send you to do it, I can't imagine what kind of future you'd have if you married him, I said. It was advice from someone who'd been there. But unfortunately, she didn't listen. The next time I heard news about them, it had spread all over City A. The young lady of the Cynthia family was pregnant out of wedlock, and President Cynthia was furious. He refused to approve his daughter's marriage to a poor boy. As it turned out, Leo had been bold enough to get her pregnant on purpose, using the child to force the family to agree to the marriage. I sighed repeatedly. In the past, he'd at least been a hypocrite. Now, he'd shed that pretense and become worse than an animal. He drove a luxury car and came to my apartment building again. Minerva, why can't you understand the saying, don't look down on a young man with nothing? I let out a scoff, looking at him like he was a dying dog. You know what? I used to think you still had a shred of conscience. I was wrong. Saying that will provoke me. I'm not a naive kid anymore. Learning from you was the right choice. Using any means to get what you want feels amazing. His eyes were filled with greed. I shook my head. Learning from me? He'd always been a bad seed. It was desire that had lit the fuse in his heart, making all his evil explode. What did that have to do with me? For every foot the devil advances, the Tao advances 10 feet. A Chinese idiom meaning good will always prevail over evil. He laughed. Minerva, I'll wait for the day you get on your knees and beg me. I watched his retreating back. How could I let him take over the Cynthia family's fortune and leave them with nothing? What he didn't know was that I had already accounted for all the things he stole back then. I just held off on taking action. After being dealt with, Yvonne had become much more obedient and even volunteered to testify against him. However, Leo was as resilient as a cockroach, and Cynthia would protect him for the sake of the child in her womb. On this day, we met again at the same coffee shop as before. This time, I was the one who invited her. She was simple-minded and harbored no ill will toward me. Her ex's former girlfriend. It was obvious she was a poor girl who truly loved that scumbag. When's the wedding date? I asked. She smiled shyly. The 15th of next month. I nodded and handed her my phone. Her face turned deathly pale instantly. Minerva, I can return all the money to you. Please. I tapped my finger on the table. I don't care about this little money. But I won't let a scumbag like him get away with his crimes. What will you get after marrying him and having this child? Will your kid lose all future opportunities just because they have a criminal father? The more I spoke, the paler her face became. She could barely hold herself together. Take care of yourself too. I'm not targeting you or the baby in your belly. This kind of person can't be kept around. It's for your own good. She was about to speak up to beg me again when I handed her a brown paper bat. I didn't want to upset you more, but I have to make this clear today. She flipped through the documents over and over again, then slammed them heavily on the table, burying her face in her hands and sobbing. How could he do this to me? I loved him so much. Leo had tasted a life of luxury and developed an insatiable greed. These were the dual contracts he had signed with the Cynthia family, embezzling hundreds of millions of yuan from them. If I hadn't secretly investigated and discovered the discrepancies in the Cynthia family's accounts, Cynthia's father would have been framed for the crime. Once her father was imprisoned, she would have been at Leo's mercy for the rest of her life. Now that things are like this, are you still going to defend him? I gently shattered the last line of defense in her heart. She had been blinded by love. But she still had her bottom line. In my past life, she had taken the place of my tragic fate. Yet I felt no joy or relief. Now, persuading her earnestly and pulling her out of this quagmire was also a way to save me from back then. First, I reported Leo to the police on charges of theft with both witnesses and evidence. The case was solid. After being some and several times, he finally showed up, looking unconcerned as if the Cynthia family was still there to back him up. "Minerva, don't waste your time. I'm a busy man," he said. His entire outfit was several tiers more high-end, and before he bought fake goods for Cynthia while she poured her heart and soul into him. I really didn't expect that even though we were in a relationship back then, you'd be so stingy. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill over such a trivial matter," he said, putting on that act of treating money like dirt again. "I'm willing to return all the money to you. It's like a blessing for the baby that's about to be born." It had to be said that after entering society, he hadn't learned a single useful skill. But he had mastered the art of being two-faced perfectly. "We're recording everything here. Please watch your words," I warned. "Do you think you still have money? You're still living in a dream," I said, clapping my hands. Leo stepped back a few steps, his face filled with doubt and alarm. "What are you talking about?" He had become more perceptive. But it was already too late. Cynthia walked in, furious. "You thought a single child could let you take over the Cynthia family? I wish I could skin you alive and drink your blood." She stepped forward and slapped him hard several times. The blows left him stunned. He held a swollen cheek, staring at her in disbelief. "What's gotten into you? We've seen through your schemes," I said, throwing the documents in front of him. Leo was stupid. But he still had a few cunning tricks up his sleeve. As the saying goes, a crafty rabbit has 3 burrows. He had long prepared an escape route abroad, planning to flee with the stolen money and leave the mess for the Cynthia family to clean up, living freely as a fugitive. Instead of arresting him rashly and alerting him, it was better to use the theft charge to lure him out of his hiding place, cutting off all chances of escape. Seeing that all was lost, Leo dropped to his knees on the floor. You let out a little sigh. "You set me up. Well played. You should have thought about this before you started," I said, looking down at him. He burst into wild laughter. Then suddenly stood up, pulled out a small knife, and lunged at me. "If I can't have a good life, you'll die with me." A policeman reacted quickly, kicking him away with one foot. The knife flew out of his hand and scratched my cheek. It didn't hurt, just a few drops of blood oozed out and trickled down to my neck. My injury was nothing serious. But it added another crime to his list. With the help of my parents and the Cynthia family, he was finally sentenced to life imprisonment and would spend the rest of his days in jail. Being mild-mannered on the surface but insincere was far better than being malicious at heart. He never would have thought that his cleverness would backfire, leaving him far worse off than he had been in my past life. Cynthia had suffered a huge blow in love and said she was afraid she would never have the courage to marry again. She loved children, though, and couldn't bear to give up this baby. "No matter who the father is, this child will always be yours. Nothing can change that. If you want to keep it, then keep it," I told her. Later, she took my advice and gave birth to the child, who grew up healthy. After repeated persuasion from my supervisor, I decided to pursue a doctoral degree. During my studies, I started my own business. With the experience from my past life and the solid knowledge I had accumulated, my company was already on the right track by the time I graduated. It was only then that I realized I had always been capable of having everything. One evening after work, I met a shabbily dressed old Taoist priest on the street. I went to a convenience store and bought him some food on a whim. He grabbed the food and devoured it hungrily. Suddenly, He looked up at me, his dim old eyes flashed with a sharp light. You are someone who returned from the underworld, filled with unresolved grievances. I neither confirmed nor denied it. He smacked his lips and continued. You even brought someone back with you. Fascinating. Fascinating. What goes around comes around. Grudges must be avenged. Wrongs must be righted. No one can escape. Even the dead will be dragged back to suffer. This is the cycle of fate in this world. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished. I wasn't afraid, just amused by the strangeness of it all. After that, I made a habit of doing good deeds. Only by leaving more positive marks on the world would this second chance at life be worth it. I never hesitated to avenge my wrongs. But I also knew there were things more important than hatred in life.